Press releases by CERN, where they admit they created a quark gluon plasma, a particle of it by at the speed of light accelerating lead together, which in their own calculations they admit could destroy the planet Earth, but they still did it and are preparing to do thousands more tests. They did create it. It weighs a centimeter sugar cube size, would weigh 40 billion tons, or many times more than the heart of a sun. It's close to black hole mass level. They go on to describe the unique material is 100,000 times hotter than the sun and denser than any known object other than a black hole. Now, before they started doing these tests, top physicists came out and said this thing could sink to the center of the Earth, then start pulling mass in, might grow for a year, 20 years, they don't know, depending on its size, and then suddenly you wouldn't know anything until it went to its next division and its next level of mass, and the whole planet would be imploded, just like in the last Star Trek movie that came out a year ago. They're throwing this in your face, and while Alan's talking, we'll show that clip of the planet being imploded behind us. They're coming out with open-air genetically engineered species. They've got this new super-ecoli that is a super mutation and highly infectious and toxic and resistant to antibiotics. Meanwhile, we have now many years in Europe and the U.S. of live viruses being sprayed on the E. coli, on the rotten meat they feed us, so they can still feed it to us. Top scientists said it's a live vaccine. It will give rise to super mutations of E. coli. We drink E. coli feces in the aspartame, a chemical weapon. If you don't believe me, folks, just search manufacturing process aspartame. I mean, I could go on for hours of how the globalists are pell-mell trying to destroy the creation, claiming they're trying to protect it, writing countless volumes about how they believe they're going to merge with machines and become God. They may have all the power, issue all the currency, but they're power-mad like Caligula and are probably going to destroy the Earth. Alan Watt, what are we facing? Why are they attempting to one-up each other on who can destroy the planet?
It's difficult to know, Alex, if they're really planning to do this kind of thing, or are they telling us they have this technology to terrify us even more into a state of abject terror? Because we're in the age, remember, of terror creation, and this is part of terror creation as well. And no doubt that they have all of this technology and probably had it for an awful long time. Whenever they discuss to the public by the media that they're working on something, is generally obsolete long ago. They've had it for many, many, many years. So I think part of it really is to add to the tension and the fearfulness in society in general. Because with most people, you understand, who don't follow the real news, they follow the standard news, they do believe what they're told, and that fear acts upon them. And they turn to government to help them and look after them like children. And that's the intention of fear creation. And I really think this is part of it, too. They've had this technology, I'm sure, for many years.
Well, Alan, expanding on all of this and looking at what the globalists are up to, clearly they are approving things. They are rolling out GMO systems. And I've talked to the top scientists that were involved in developing many of these systems. They admit they don't even know how this stuff's going to mutate. Or are you saying that this is a split-off technological civilization and that they're more advanced than we know?
Well, going back to big planners, people who took part in shaping the culture that we've lived through in our lifetime, who was born long before us, the Bertrand-Russell. Bertrand-Russell said that eventually the elite will be almost like a separate species. Well, I think technically they are, because you see, they're given access to very high technologies and sciences, not the lower type that we're all used to, not the stuff that comes out in popular science. And I think their whole ability to defeat virus and the bacterium in the system is using a different technology altogether. They're certainly not stuck on penicillin and so on as we are. So they're not bothered about that. They're immune. They're immune to most of these deadly diseases. And part of the payoff they give the lackey politicians, the higher politicians, is to get in on inoculations of their family and themselves with the real stuff. The real stuff that one shot probably will stop all bacterium from taking off in your system. It's instead of going after individual bacterium, they'll kill every deadly type of bacterium before it starts to take off in your body. And so they've had this for an awful long time. Back in the 80s, for instance, in the US, Canada, and the British Commonwealth countries, the same year, I think it was 85, 86, the government suddenly just stated that all politicians and families and the higher bureaucrats of the country would be given access to full medical treatment in high technological military establishments. And I thought, well, why is that when they've got the best hospitals elsewhere for the public and all that? And I knew something was up then. And I remember when different outbreaks hit Canada, the politicians, for instance, the flesh-eating bacterium suddenly hit the country. And one of the politicians in the federal government came down with it. It transpired that he was given shots in his arm, and in his leg, and that's where he got the flesh-eating bacteria. And the same article said his wife and daughter also had it to a minor degree, and they both had it in their arm. So they were given shots against this stuff. The general public weren't. And you always find one person in maybe 10,000 who'll get a more live bacterium.
By the way, Alan, we saw that 2 years ago when it came out that Merkel and the government officials were being given a special, quote, clean vaccine. Then we learned in England and the U.S., they have special medical divisions that serve them, and they're given something else than us. So clearly this is going on.
And also, too, remember when Lady Diana was on the go doing her partying across the world, a reporter was allowed to follow her for 2 or 3 weeks, and he saw her lifestyle, and the promiscuity was incredible in that class of being. And he asked the one question towards the last week, the last few days, and he said, aren't any of you worried about getting AIDS or venereal disease? And he said there was a stunned silence. They all looked at each other like he was crazy. Well, and I figured out, I said, because they've all got the real shots that stop all of that. They don't get these things like we do.
Well, that's right. Science, and more of this is being admitted, that there is a breakaway civilization under national security. And now we know that it wasn't just H.G. Wells pre-1900 writing about atomic weapons. We now know there were books written in the 1850s about atomic weapons, and it really wasn't just Max Planck in 1900 that developed the idea. And then we see the stealth helicopter with the fake bin Laden killing, crashing. They now admit they want the whole military to go drone and robot, and they'll have robots working on the drones and the robots where humans won't even be needed. That's why they call it the end of history, the end of humanity, why the future doesn't need us.
Mm-hmm, that's correct. That's all part of that. And towards the end, all of the big writers, from Charles Galton, Darwin, all the way down to the present time, the United Nations talk about the need to rapidly reduce the population. Rockefeller, in his last major world speech with the Lucky Gene Club, as they call it, said the same thing. We need rapid depopulation. So this is the time now to start bringing out the killer bacterium, which will affect the general population. We've already had an outbreak in Ontario now. It's come supposedly from Pakistan. And it's not
really sure. Stay there. We'll be right back. Meanwhile, the UN just got caught again shooting kids up with polio. Okay, Alan Watt is back with us. Got a better phone connection with him. Alan, looking at the current economic implosion and what's happening right now, the IMF, the World Bank documents are on record. We told people decades ago that they would implode the world economy through derivatives when they got rid of Glass-Steagall, that they would then offer a new global government as the Bank of the World as the solution. We've got more news reports where the federal government admits that the cap and trade is a carbon tax to shut down our industrial operations. In fact, here it is, CNS News. Obama's commerce nominee, cap and trade good for hiding carbon taxes. And they go on to shut down industrial operations. See, people don't get this. The monopoly men want to shut down industrial operations. They want to make us dependent. They want to herd us into the cities. They don't want alternative energy. It's the opposite of that. But to control that movement, they then try to finance it with the tax incentives so they can direct it in the way they want. And now, debt fears. U.S. rating could be placed under review, warns Moody's. It was Standard & Poor's 2 months ago. That's 2 of the 3 rating agencies. Gives lawmakers until mid-July to show progress in talks. That means cutting the benefits, raising taxes, giving the bankers more or they'll raise the debt level. Economic horror as data plunges. Joblessness increases. So I thought the economy was great, Alan. Where are they going? What do the globalists want to do?
Well, they've said it many times, even long ago. They said there must never be another America across the world, and the best thing they could do was dismantle all the industry within America. That was all part of this big plan. And this is the phase you're going through now. I've said for years that as America, which was the military machine to standardize the world for the big boys, when they were finishing off the last of their jobs, they'd pull the rug from under their feet at home. And that's what you're seeing now. And you understand, too, nothing is debated in front of the public. Nothing of any import is debated at all. It's done in very high meetings with high-level bureaucrats going across the world signing agreements.
Well, we got that from the SPP and other documents that have been, lawsuits have been filed to get them. They go into these North American Union EU meetings, the Fortune 100 is there, and they actually tell the leaders of the different federal departments what they're going to do, and they absolutely click their heels and follow it.
Yes, they call the guys Sherpas. Sherpas are the bureaucrats who spend a year traveling across the world negotiating with other countries' bureaucrats, and they draft up all the stuff that's signed at these G8 and G20 meetings, and they just go and have a big party at the G20 meetings and sign their names to the documents. When Rothschild came out in Britain and said that his family's private bank in Switzerland would handle all the carbon trade for the planet, backed by Al Gore, of course, then when you make an announcement like that, they're not giving you a suggestion, they're telling you how it's going to be. This is a must-be, as they call it. It's not going to be debated through any Congress or Parliament. It's simply done. And that's when they go to such work and spend years setting the whole system up, they don't back off and say the public don't want it, we better give the public what they want. That doesn't happen. But there's no input at all in today's society of anything called democracy, unless you're an NGO funded by the foundations. So Australia, as you know, is really almost a feminist government now, Fabian-socialist, and they're the first ones to go carbon neutral, as they call it. And but half the farmers now can't even plant on their lands because they're classified as carbon sinks. So you still got to pay for the land. No one wants to buy it, so you've got to keep paying the taxes for it, and that's you stuck for life. There's no compensation. There's nothing. That's just to be the way across the whole world, except for a few countries that are favoured countries. And we know the up-and-coming nations, Brazil, we've got Brazil, India, China is still classed, by the way, as an up-and-coming country, even though it's the manufacturer for the whole planet. They've got tax exemptions. They have, for all investments, by the way, 15 years free tax if you come in to build a factory there.
And what they do is they shut down all the Western zones and then say no taxes basically to go to China or India. And then everything moves there because those countries are already under a tyranny, and it's meant to lower the standard of the rest of the globe. It's all on record. And when you mention, I have the newscast out of England and Australia, how good half the farmland is now off limits. You can't use it. And then they tell the farmers, but you've still got to pay the full tax on it. But then what they do is once they go bankrupt, the government buys it and then gives it to Fortune 500 and then removes the exemptions, just like Obama with the health care, giving over 2,000 waivers to his friends where they don't have to buy the health care, but you do. And General Electric is exempt from the carbon taxes. It's pure mafia evil, just total crime out in the open.
You've got to remember, too, Alex, that everything changed in the 70s when the Club of Rome. Now, the Club of Rome is a big premier think tank. Whatever they think about in their big think tanks becomes the way of the future, and everyone listens to them. That's why they're paid to do what to do. And they're given the tasks of how to con the public under different guises. Global warming was one. They were the guys who dreamed up global warming.
Yeah, let's break it down, because you've got all the documents. We've covered it in Endgame. It's premeditated evil. They admit it is. Will the yuppies wake up? Never. They love being conned. They love being hurt. They love being schmucks. They love being scammed.
We're on